Hello, this is Brainwash with Gerald. Podcasting from beautiful South Jersey. Brainwash, the podcast that cleans your brain. So I had all these plans. I was going to talk about why we got everything wrong about Shakespeare. So I had all my podcasts planned out. Hamlet first. It's a comedy. Othello, it's also a comedy. King Lear, absolutely. Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet, I had planned to show you how I wanted to do a geriatric version where Romeo and Juliet are two elderly people. And the funny thing is that if you do it that way, you read the text that way, you don't even have to change it that much. The parents nowadays speak the same way to their parents as they do to their children. It's interesting. So then we did a trial, my son and I, and it was like, whatever. It's not that interesting. And then I figured, I had it all figured out. Oh, we are all vessels for the virus. The virus has been on Earth ever since there was life, maybe even before that. So the virus needed actual living cells to procreate, not even to live, to procreate, to further itself, to spread itself. And so my idea was to look at history from the perspective of the virus. Like wars happen because the virus is dictating us to fight each other so they can spread quicker and faster. Turns out, by the way, that the microorganisms in our system, we have 3 pounds of microorganisms in our intestines, not to mention all the viruses and other cells in and out around our body. I think we have more viruses in our body than we have actual body cells, believe it or not. So these viruses and these microorganisms, they all have an effect on us, on our mood, on our strength, on our intelligence, on our social skills. And so in a way you can assume that the virus is able to manipulate us, because the virus is a parasite. And there's actually in nature examples like rabies, for instance. Rabies is an example of how how this microorganism is able to alter an animal's behavior. So the rabies infected animal wants to bite another animal in order to spread the species. So my idea was to look at history from the perspective of the virus. And I think that explains why we don't want to use nuclear bombs anymore, because that kills the virus. So something inside us tells us it's not okay to annihilate the entire world, because that will mean the end of all the existence of all the human bonded viruses. Anyway, that was just. Then I realized that in order to make a podcast, it's not about big ideas. It's not about telling people how you think the world fits together. It's about making a podcast. It's like, what the hell did you do today? Like today, what did I do today? I have been working on a movie script. I'm going to submit it to a competition called the Script Pipeline. You pay some money for it, and then if you do well, people will bring it to the attention of agents and what have you, and maybe pitch it for you somewhere. And what I did this morning, I sent the script out to some people I trust and asked them to read it, and I'm waiting for their feedback. The funny thing was that the script is the script is based on a series of stories I wrote for a website called the Philly soccer page. It was, the off season. Nothing was going on, and I think I met the guy in the bar. He was running. The guy who ran the website also was also a bartender, and and I don't know. We just started talking, and you know how like people like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, and even Dickens, they wrote weekly columns in newspapers, and all those columns put together became novels. So my idea was to write a weekly column, so to speak, on this website about soccer. So so what I did was I created a series called the Pine Barrens League. It's still on the Philly soccer page, and it follows a group of outlaws, so to speak, who are playing this underground soccer league in the Pine Barrens, and it's a kind of a king of the hill competition. So when you win, you get to the next round, and then some other challenger comes up, and if you win, you keep going. And at the end, when you win the whole thing, you get, I don't know how much money. So the and then what I did was I being the educator, schooler, whatever you want to call it, as I am, I just made it into a soccer history lesson. So me being Dutch, my team, the team I was writing about, was playing total soccer, of course. And then we played the Italians, we played Catenaccio, and the Russians, they played their system, and the Americans played their system, and the Germans, blah 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 blah. And they all have and they all have some sort of history behind their game, and I used that to describe the matches, and basically the stories were descriptions of fictional soccer matches. And I thought the idea was brilliant, of course. I was like, oh, this is like Fight Club and soccer together. This is like a movie. So I started working on a script, and I soon realized that you can't really show like 10 soccer matches in one movie. That doesn't work. So I figured, well, let's see. How can we make this interesting? How can we make the stakes a little higher? And then, you know how these things go. One thing leads to another, and at the end, I had a script about this guy who works in the kitchen, who has a bunch of friends who have a team, who play underground soccer league, and they were asked by some Russian gambling tycoon to represent to represent the United States. By the way, this is not a COVID cough. It's a high allergy day today, so excuse me. Anyway, so the Russian set up a game in the Pine Barrens between team of my character and a bunch of Russians who would fly in, and then he would broadcast it mostly in non-European, non-Western countries, and then in casinos and bars and online, so that people could bet on them. And he was hoping that people in China and other Asian casinos would not realize that they weren't watching the actual national teams, but they were watching people pretending to be. At the same token, he did want to have a good game, so he had a and I have to say, there's a lot of amateur underground players who are excellent soccer players. So the level of play was fairly high. Anyway, to make a long story short, me as a aspiring film writer, I wanted to bring the stakes up as high as possible. So what happened was, at the moment suprême, at the end of the game, it was 1-1 or 2-2, overtime. The ref calls a penalty against the Russians. Oh yeah, and then I forgot to mention that if they would win, they would get like $1 million, and if they would lose, then the Russian guy would win $1 billion. So the game was rigged, right? So it was a betting game. So the Russian guy wanted to make money off the game himself. So he made sure that his team would win. He would win the bet, but he was talking up the Americans a lot. So people would bet a lot of money on it, and then eventually he could hopefully run away with some cash. And then he promised the Americans they would get lots of money if they would win, just to fool them. And the Americans were like, yeah, we get that, but we want to see the money before we play the game. And so they called his bluff, and he was able to get like $1 million in a big hockey bag, put it next to the sideline. It was on the cameras. The whole world could see it. And they started playing the game, and of course, our smart American friends came prepared, so they knew that the field was going to be soft. So they practiced on soft ground for a few weeks so that the blacks would be used to it. The Russians weren't used to it; they were used to harder turf. So after half an hour, it's like they would feel like you run on the beach for half an hour. If you have never run on the beach, it's gonna hurt. So they were hurting after half an hour and getting weaker and weaker. And of course, the end of the match, the game is it's tied, overtime, no goals, and at the end, right before the end of the game, Russians foul inside the 18, penalty kick. As a collateral, the Russian guy had kidnapped the main character's girlfriend. So at the moment where he has to take the penalty kick, he is shown a picture on a phone showing the girlfriend tied up, and saying, if you score, she will die. So my idea was, thinking only in plots, to create a catharsis, so you will, where the guy has to make the choice between, am I choosing the girl or am I choosing the game? And then I would envision couples going to the movies and the women rooting for the girl and the men rooting for the guy and blah 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 blah. So I sent in that script to the pipeline people, and if you pay a little extra, they will give you some feedback. And the feedback was too much soccer. There's no emotional arc. There's no character development. They said it's well written, but it's written like it's a parody. You make it it's too extreme. It's too out there. People are never going to believe it. And so I read the script again, and I was like, yeah. I got a little carried away with the whole thing. So I basically dumped it, and I just kept the main character, put him in a different context, and figured it should be about him. It should be about his journey. And in the meantime, I had read up about the what they call the hero's journey. You know how as a writer you always try to stay away from methods and models and all that's conventions mostly. And then later on, you realized how wrong you were to stay away from those conventions. Well, that was what happened to me when it came to the hero's journey. I was like, okay, yeah, this is it. And then I also realized that most movies are written according to that pattern. Even movies like, think about it. Even Rocky or Step Brothers or anything you can think of. Imagine the hero's journey as a circle, like a clock. You can actually find it on Wikipedia if you Google hero's journey. So the idea is basically that the story starts in a situation. There is a something that sets the action into motion. And that means the main character can respond to it or not. So it's a movie, so he will respond to it or she will respond to it. And then from there, it will go from on the graph from the known to the unknown. So, for instance, I mentioned Step Brothers, right? So Step Brothers is a movie about two brothers who have who are forced to live together. They're both 40 years old, and their parents, they got remarried, and the kids were still living at home, so they had to go with them. So before they were living with each other, they were perfectly happy, had their own lives, their own hobbies, whatever. And now they had to adapt. So they had to negotiate each other's space. They had to negotiate each other's wants and needs. At some and of course, in the beginning, there was fights and this and that, and then they became friends. And then they started making trouble for their parents, so they kicked them out. And they went from bad to worse. And at some point, they were literally kicked out of the house. They had to find regular jobs, like regular boring jobs. They had to beg for their families for to get a job, and so they through all this conflict and drama, they basically learned their lesson. At the end of the film, they were friends again, but they're also more adult, more pleasant people in a way, while they were able to maintain their own, youthful integrity, to put it that way. I mean, that's if you have seen the movie, I think you understand this little pattern. But in fact, most movies, they use that same trajectory. And if you think about it, if you think about life, what makes life interesting is change. And change is hard. Change is going to take conflict. Change is sometimes it's going to take fights, and in not every case, you're going to end up on a better place. So you have to pick your fights. I did the same in my script. So my guy, when I started in the original script, he was working in a restaurant and kind of had a crush on his boss, the one who got kidnapped later on. And so I put him in a different situation. I put him in a home where he is the stay-at-home dad, and the wife is the one who's working, and he is depressed. House is a mess. The kids are eating junk food. He doesn't really care anymore. And then she comes home one day and she just snaps because she can't take it anymore. She takes the kids away from him, and he's left by himself. And then he goes to and then it's on a soccer field. He's also kind of an asshole. He's one of those guys who are actually really good, but they don't never play with other people. He was always used to dribbling the ball, scoring goals, and the teams he played for facilitated. They not facilitated him. They what's that word? They were enablers. They enabled him to do that. I've seen that. I've seen coaching kids. I've seen how parent coaches do that. Like one kid can do something very well, and he does that into high school, even to college sometimes. But when the time you come to the real world, you have to learn how to play the whole damn game, not just dribble and score goals. So he was one of those guys. And that's why he got the potential to become a pro, but he never got there because he was not able to pass the ball or didn't want to pass the ball, whatever. So that was my my morning this morning, and then I went to the organic supermarket to pick up my farm, my vegetables. Pick up the vegetables. And I had a good conversation with a friend of mine, Jeff, about making podcasts, which we both are trying to do. We'll see how it goes from here on. And then about the newspaper, the New York Times, which I do infrequently. I like to keep up with the news, but then again, the news today, it's repetitive and sad. Yeah. So the sad thing that happened was, first of all, the first sad thing that happened in the Netherlands a couple of days ago was that a whole group of surfers in Scheveningen drowned. Experienced surfers. They were teachers, actually. Some of them were teachers. They have been doing that for years. Everybody knew them. And because they drowned because there was so much foam floating on the waves that they couldn't I think they just couldn't breathe when they fell off the board. So if you imagine you're in the water and there's a layer of foam over your head, you can't really breathe inside the foam. It closes off your oxygen supply. That's how I envision it. Anyway, and then today it was a horrible, horrible picture on the front page about a bomb attack in Afghanistan. They bombed a maternity ward. Let me hear that say it again. They bombed a maternity ward. You see a rescue worker holding a baby in his hand. Can you imagine thinking, sitting around with some fellow terrorists and say, what are we going to bomb tomorrow? And they're going to go like, oh, let's bomb the maternity ward. It'll make an impression. Or maybe they made a mistake. I don't know. It's unbelievable. I mean, that's in the yeah. Sorry, I was just thinking about that. It's just I just can't fathom it. On the other hand, yeah, you have to think about these things as the way they are, the absurdity of it. At the same time, but what I said earlier, you have to put things in a historic perspective, and it's horrible what happened. It's horrible what happens elsewhere, but if you I mean, not even think about it. Not even that long ago. People were, and I'm talking days, not years. People are murdered because they're black. Or so you make a podcast and you're speechless. How does that work? Yeah, I'm just trying to think about. I'm not trying. I'm trying to say something sensible about this, I guess. I would, yeah. If you have an opinion about it, please let me know. Have you ever looked into the history of violence? And then, so you're Dutch, I'm European, so I've been reading some books about the history of the Dutch, and look at it from that perspective: violence, repression, and we were not strange to that, just like everybody else. Our whole history is a freaking battlefield, if you will. I'm not only talking about slavery, colonialism. I'm just talking about back in the early Middle Ages, where they were fighting each other, like the people from what's now Holland, in the 1400s, sailed over the Zuiderzee, as they called it, side over the sea, what is it, 20, 30 kilometers to invade the province of Friesland, which is now part of one country. And they were there to put down the law, and of course they didn't succeed because even though it's a freaking small country, they figured they weren't well prepared, and it was all, I don't know. They why do people start wars anyways? This is fucking stupid. Anyway, so they what I'm trying to say is that they have been fighting each other for centuries. Over Catholic versus Protestants, different tribes, different colors, different cities. Even my grandmother was telling about, when she was young, and we're talking about the early 1900s, 1914, 15, 16, that there was the annual market, and then the people from Friesland were fighting the people from Groningen. There were huge brawls, fist fighting. Wow. I get it in a way. You know how people like Hariri, Yuval Noah Hariri is comparing us humans to chimpanzees, how he compares the social structure of our hunter-gatherers to the social structure of current chimpanzees. And one of the things he said, for instance, that there's a maximum amount, the group can, the group size has a maximum. So if it exceeds a certain amount of number of people, of individuals, it will split off and start another group. That's one of the things he said, and that's the evidence shows that is the case with us being hunter-gatherers, because every time they found a settlement, they could estimate the approximate size of the group, and they were never bigger than, I don't know, 125 individuals. And the same with the chimps. They have their maximum is, I forgot what it was, maybe 80, 90. But one of the things that chimpanzees do, and I'm assuming the humans did as well, is they have first of all, they have a leader, of course, and then you have the second runner-up who wants to challenge the leader. But in order to challenge the leader, you have to first challenge all the other people to become the challenger. So all the guys in the group are fighting each other, and then the strongest one is going to challenge the leader. That's what it was, and that's what's, to me, what a lot of violence looks like. Look at the freaking Friday night football games. You see the best and brightest of your town fighting, butchering each other. And under the eye of the adult males, so oh, good, let's kill let them kill each other, because then they're not going to go after our wives and daughters. That's how it's on a very basic level. That's how it looks like. Violence it seems to be not only a way to get things. To me, it seems more. It seems to be a result of impotence. Let's say it that way, impotence. So if you have an argument with someone, and that person doesn't want to listen, and you don't want to listen to that person, and it is about like a parking spot, for instance, and before you know it, you're out of words, and you start beating each other up. To what avail? I don't know. Are you going to get a parking lot because you beat someone up? No, but you have to get it out of your system. Maybe. Does it make you feel good? No, you're going to get hurt. Maybe you're going to get killed. And yeah, I get it. Actually, I get it. I have never done that, but I do know the sentiment behind it. Everybody gets pissed at other people, but first of all, I guess I'm able to verbalize my anger fairly well, so get out of my way. And second, when I do get angry sometimes, mostly at myself, and I just kick the wall or whatever. That's not giving in very much, or yeah. And those things I'm not proud of, but I think we all have our own moments of frustrations and pain and what have you. But violence in history, it's just the sheer size of it is just shocking. I think how much wars there have been, and how vicious and how vicious people were. I was just watching a series on Amazon about the bodies we find, what they tell us about history. So these are all bodies who died sometime in the Middle Ages, and one episode was about the Battle of Visby. Visby is in Gotland, Sweden. The Battle of Visby. And this is one of those things everybody should know, I'm guessing. The Battle of Visby, hundreds of people were slaughtered, but the exciting quotient between quotation marks for historians and archaeologists is the exciting part is that the people who were killed were thrown in a grave with their clothes on, with their armor still on, and henceforth, this is the only source we have for how armor looked like in the Middle Ages. And so we're talking about the 1300s. So it's interesting to look at. We have these ideas of how people were dressed in the Middle Ages, and it was not like that at all, of course. The other thing what's not realistic, and especially I'm now referring to movies, is the way people fought. In movies, we always see knights, mostly knights, with huge swords, ching, 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 fighting each other. But that's not how they fought, apparently. So they looked at the skeletons. They found hundreds of skeletons. And they looked at the bones in the legs. They looked at your bones, and they, not everyone, most of them had like cuts in the bone, 5-6 cuts on each side. So that meant that these people who were wearing body armor, maybe a helmet and some sort of sword, or maybe just a club or a spear, they were defending themselves against the Danes, and the Danes hired German mercenaries, and the only thing they seemed to have been doing was chop at the legs. That was the weak spot. There was no protection there. So imagine, you're fighting a war, people come in from whatever, and with huge swords, and they chuck, they hit your leg, you're down, and then your head goes off. And take your helmet, take your sword, next. And then, so that's how they conquered Gotland, which was at the time, and it's also a very interesting part of history. It was at the time a huge trading hub in the middle of the Baltic Sea. They found goods from literally all over the world there in Gotland. It was pretty amazing. I actually made a reference in my Hamlet podcast we made earlier about how the Baltic Sea at the time was a huge economic factor, and that people had to pay tolls to get into the Baltic Sea when they passed the Sand. And they passed a castle called Elsinore. Yeah, Elsinore. But I'm not going to talk about Shakespeare. I'm not going to talk about... On the other hand, we're talking about violence. If you look at Shakespeare, look at Hamlet. My God. Polonius, he sees something moving behind a curtain and stabs him. Right now, we would be like, that's the worst thing that people can do. But in those days, oh my God, that would be the joke of the day. People love that kind of stuff. People didn't die in those days. They just were bodies, and they were on the way to heaven, so they didn't care. So it's another thing that's needs to be corrected, I'm afraid. So I call this show Brainwash because I think we have all these wrong presumptions about a lot of things, but mostly everything. And and so the reason why I chose Shakespeare is because it's a fantastic example of how we can set things straight, how we are wrong about basically about how we've been educated, how we've been conditioned. Shakespeare is comedy. It's not freaking drama. My God. Anyway, so we were talking about violence, right? So violence is the same thing. We have this strange idea fed to us by movies, mostly, about how people behaved in the Middle Ages. We talk about nobility as if these people were gentle people. They were not gentle people. They were freaking morons. If you were a peasant and your daughter was cute and the Lord came by and he was like, "Oh, give me your daughter," then you had to give up your daughter. That's how it was. He would have his way with her, kill her, and go for the next. That would be more normal than for instance a Cinderella story or something like that. That was exception. That was a fairy tale, literally a fairy tale. A prince marrying a commoner. That never happened. That was the dumbest thing you could do. Love. Bacon said about love. He said, "Love is something that belongs on the stage. That's fantasy." Love, but that's another topic, maybe for another show. But love, my God. It's true. If you're in love, you're in love. But we have to think about how that idea has been brought to us. How we have learned to love. We assume too much. We assume way too much. Was there any romantic love in the Bible where people fell in love? There was the love of God, unrequited love. There was, but like David and Bathsheba, was that love? No, that was pure lust. And the violence was not just against the enemy; it was also against ourselves. Of course, there was, the well-known. There was a continuous violence against the Jews in Europe and Eastern Europe. Homosexuals, gypsies, people who had a different religion. The Anabaptists come to mind. The Anabaptists had this stigma of crazy people who were running around on the street naked, promiscuous, what have you. And if you look at it from an economic perspective and look at what the ideas these people had, they were basically social democrats. They wanted a fair and equal society between men and women. They wanted to have a decent income. And of course they are being trampled. Because who runs the Middle Ages? Think about that. People who own the land, the merchants, and the church. They run the Middle Ages. That's how it was. And have we progressed much? I don't think so. We're just being run by other people. But my point was, I was talking about violence. So violence, it's interesting to see how violence and technology go hand in hand. And the climax of that whole process, which has started like from the beginning of life, beginning of time, we always have hammered each other's heads in that, and it seemed to find an apotheosis in the Holocaust. The Holocaust was the most extreme form of human mass murder ever happened in the world. It was obscene. About it, you're how do you take in your reality? You look through a screen. Most people see reality through some sort of screen. The window, the car screen, your computer, your phone. When was the last time you had a good conversation with someone? When was the last time you had a physical? I mean, we can't do that anymore, but like a physical contact with someone. Yeah. Weird. So how are we gonna do? The question, of course, is since we are in this quarantine situation, how do we want life to look like in 100 years or 500 years? And what can we do about it? What can we do about making life more valuable to our children and our children's children? Or do we just think about ourselves? Do we just think about our own interest? Is it more important? Am I being pleased enough? Am I being fed enough? Yeah. I wasn't planning on making this such a heavy podcast. I wasn't planning on making this I don't know, about sadness, basically. But the truth is that it's not a good time right now. And we all are kind of suffering in a way. Some more than others. But this fucking sucks. This whole situation sucks. And everybody is very capable of pointing their fingers at people, but what it comes down to eventually at the end is that we have to resolve this together. And I'm hoping that will lead to some other positive developments. But that's for the next podcast. Thank you for listening. This was Brainwash with Gerald.